Hey, what's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken, and welcome back to another video. Valve really just released an update. They're an American company. Today, July 4th, is an American holiday. You'd think they'd be on vacation, but no, man. I will never understand their update schedule or lack thereof. Anyways, yeah, it's a pretty big update chock full of balance changes. Just a lot of balance in this update. So, let's get started. But before we do, real quick, if you guys have been enjoying my update coverage and all of the fun builds that we've been experimenting with on the channel, then make sure that you're subscribed down below. It's absolutely free and it helps out a ton. It helps you stay up to date on all my latest videos and promotes my videos in the algorithm so that way I can actually keep making videos for you. But yeah, with that being said, let's get started with the first few general changes. Now, there's no actual map changes, but we do have some changes that are trying to bring the Spirit and Gun builds back closer together in terms of their power scaling. So let's talk about that. So first of all, the bullet cycle time for all heroes has been increased by 5%, which is an effective reduction in gun DPS globally of about 5%. And basically, I think what this means is that every hero's fire rate is just slightly slower now. At least it kind of feels that way on Infernus. It's really hard to tell, but basically, yeah, 5% less gun damage globally across all heroes is what that means. And they have also done some changes to spirit scaling. So the spirit bonus based on souls spent in the tree, that is, you know, when you buy a bunch of spirit items here and then invest into spirit power, that has been increased by about 25%. And to compensate, they have also changed a few other things. So ability-based damage just globally, and AP point bonus damage has been reduced by 8%. So what does that mean? Well, the base damage of Afterburn here is 12. That's been nerfed by 8%. And then if we upgrade to the tier 3, this adds on 28 damage per second. That 28 damage per second has also been nerfed by 8%. So effectively, even with this upgrade here, we're still just 8% weaker in terms of our spirit damage on the Afterburn. However, this does not affect the spirit scaling. So you see that the spirit scaling is 0.7 on my damage per second here for every spirit power I get. That has not been affected by this change. So it's only the base damage that we're really talking about here. They have also reduced the spirit that you gain from leveling from 1.25 down to 1.1. So for each boon you get a little bit less spirit now. So it's much more rewarding to invest in spirit items now in terms of the spirit power you get from investment, and to compensate, you get less spirit power for just passively leveling up your character. And also the base damage of everything is just a little bit weaker now, but you can still level that up and make it pretty high in the late game. And finally, one very big change for every character across the board is that ultimate cooldowns are now increased by 10% globally, and this again affects both base and upgrades, so the total cooldown with ability points is still 10% longer. This is going to affect each hero a bit disproportionately. So Dynamo here, with the longest ultimate cooldown in the game, it gets affected by it way more than someone like Moen, Krill, or Wraith. So yeah. But regardless, every character is going to have to wait just a little bit longer now before they get their next ultimate online. And you'll probably see why when we get to the spirit items. Next, we can talk a little bit about the early games. So they've kind of changed up the first two boons in particular. Previously, at 300 souls, which is the first boon that you would unlock, you would get an ability unlock. So you'd get two abilities online back to back really fast, and then the third ability would come online much later, and it kind of felt like there was a disconnect there. That's been changed. So now, at 300 souls, you get an ability upgrade instead of an ability unlock, and then at 600 souls, that's when you get your next ability unlock. So it should be a bit smoother now, the progression of getting all your abilities online. But it does mean that for those super duper early fights, you're not going to have two abilities online ready to go. You're only going to have the one, so that might be a little bit more awkward. And then they have also increased the small neutral camp bounty by 15%, so these early tier 1 camps that spawn in pretty early into a match are just slightly more rewarding now, so that's another thing to consider. Let's talk about zip lines now. So normally, you know how fast you go on a zip line, it's about 21 meters per second, right? Just kind of chill, slow experience. But if you take the base guardians on a lane, that significantly improves the speed on the zip lines, and they've actually buffed that. So if I just kill this guy now real quick, oh no, he's been healing. Yes, I did it. Now, the zip lines are going to be much faster. So if I jump on this, we are now moving at a staggering 49 meters per second. So this has been increased from a 120% bonus up to a 140% bonus. So much, much faster now. And also the ramp up time has been reduced from 4 seconds to 3 seconds. And that's the time it takes to actually reach that top speed. So yeah, the zip lines, after you take the base Guardians, are just much faster now. It's even more rewarding to take the base Guardians than it already was, so that's pretty neat. Now let's talk about the Rejuve, because this guy has received a ton of changes. So, first of all, let's talk about the actual bonus that it gives. The bonus duration has been changed from a static 4 minutes to now ramp up as the match goes on. So, it starts out at 3 minutes, and then in the middle of the match, it'll be a 4-minute duration, and then in the late game, it'll be a 5-minute duration on the Rejuve. So it'll make those late game Rejuves just that much more impactful. And then also they have nerfed the health bonus that Rejuve troopers receive. Previously it started at 200 and then ramped up to 260% extra health, and now it has gone down to 170% bonus, scaling up to 230% bonus, which is definitely fair, especially when those Rejuve boosted minions are stacking with the damage reduction that they get in the base. It's just ridiculous. After that, let's talk about the actual mid-boss itself. This guy right here, the dude. So the total bounty of souls that you get from killing the mid-boss has been drastically improved. Previously, it started at a baseline of 500 and then ramped up by 50 per minute, and that would be spread evenly across all players. So, if you took the Rejuve like right away, it was hardly anything. Now, it starts at a baseline of 2,000 souls, so they've quadrupled it, and then it still ramps up at 50 per minute. So, it just has a much higher starting baseline now, and you're going to notice those souls a lot more quickly during the match. And this is also, by the way, unrelated to who actually secures the Rejuve Crystal. This is only referring to the souls that you get from actually killing the mid-boss itself. That's where the souls come from. Up next, the mid-boss has had some sort of shield and health switcheroonies here. So, the shield regeneration has been changed. It's been reduced actually pretty drastically. It had a baseline of 100 shield and gain 8 shield per minute. That has gone down pretty much in half. It's gone down to a baseline of 50 shield, and then it only gains 7 shield per minute. So it's much easier to break through and hit that raw health pool now. So that's actually a pretty big change, and it's going to be a lot easier to solo the mid-boss now, I think. However, they have increased the mid-boss's total HP by 15%, so it is a little bit tankier in that regard, but it's a lot easier to damage the permanent hit points now. And then the mid-boss warning sound also now plays at 70% HP rather than 60%, so I can get that to proc here. Boom, there we go. So now the enemy team will have more time to react to you if your team is trying to take the Rejuvenator, and that's very important because the next change is actually compounding on a previous change. So previously they reduced the Rejuve drop duration down to 8 seconds, and it has been reduced again from 8 seconds down to 7 seconds. So if we just pop the mid-boss here, that crystal's going to come down pretty dang fast now. Boom, solo the mid-boss, and here it comes, and it descends 1 second faster, so you have even less time to react after that mid-boss has been killed. Your timing's got to be tight. I feel like there are going to be a lot more actual, like, brawls for the Rejuve now, because that warning sound plays quicker, the crystal drops quicker, the mid-boss, I feel overall now, is going to be a bit quicker to kill. So yeah, you're really going to have to be diligent with your mid-boss takes now. This is going to be very interesting. And also on top of that, just to kind of wrap it all up, the mid-boss's spirit resistance from abilities and items has been reduced. Abilities went from 30% down to 20%, and items got a pretty big reduction from 50% down to 20%. So, like, let's say you have a random cold front, that'll do more damage to the mid-boss now. So yeah, cold front normally does 146 damage. Pop that, it does 117, so that's much more effective against the mid-boss now. On top of that, the Guardians and the Walkers both have had their bounty of souls reduced. The Guardians have gone from 1650 down to 1000, and the Walkers have gone from 4500 down to 3500. Still very lucrative to take them, but it does mean that taking them isn't as big of a deal for the souls now than it was before, and I think part of the reason why they're doing this change is because, obviously, killing Guardians no longer has any of those soul orbs pop up that enemies can deny, so it's guaranteed souls now. Makes sense to make them a bit weaker. Also, Guardian base resistance has increased from 40% to 60%, and it'll decay after 10 minutes, still same values as creeps, so basically, yeah, it's going to be a little bit tougher to damage the Guardians in those first 10 minutes of a match. So yeah, that should be interesting as well, because I have seen some shockingly fast Guardian takes recently, like sub 4-minute Guardian takes. Some people are just crazy. So yeah, that should be a bit harder now. Getting kills on enemies has been slightly adjusted in terms of the amount of souls it gives. So the base value has been reduced from 300 to 250. Those early game kills now mean even less, but the end kill value has been increased from 2,000 souls up to 2,200 souls. So that is a nice big increase. So yeah, just kind of adjusting the minimum and maximum souls you get from kills. Pretty simple. Bullet lifesteal and spirit lifesteal from creeps has been increased. Bullet lifesteal has gone to 60%, up from 50%. And spirit lifesteal has gone from 33% up to 40%. So it's a bit easier to lifesteal off of creeps than regenerate yourself. Comeback values are now roughly 25% stronger, and this was actually already in the game previously, in a minor patch. And so yeah, if you're behind by a good margin of souls, and then you just take some creeps, take some camps, those are going to give more souls than they did before, thanks to this comeback mechanic. There are also various bug fixes, which I'll go ahead and put on the screen now for you to read, and we're going to get into the item changes now, but before we do, if you've been enjoying the update coverage so far, then make sure to drop a like on the video, and also, once we're done with the video, comment down below what you think about the update. I would love to hear your thoughts. But yeah, let's get started with the weapon items now. So, they have changed a few things, buffed a few things, nerfed a few things. First of all, Restorative Shot is better now. You get 50 healing from heroes and 20 healing from NPCs now. Previously, it was 40 and 15 respectively. And that's the only Tier 1 change, so moving swiftly on to Tier 2. Split Shot has been buffed, the duration has been increased from 4.5 seconds to 5 seconds, and the cooldown has been reduced from 16 seconds to 14 seconds. So you generally get more uptime on this. I still think it's a really weird item, though. I genuinely don't really see anybody using this effectively. It probably needs more love than this, but it's a step in the right direction, I guess. Weakening Headshot no longer has a 3 seconds cooldown now. I actually kind of just assumed they covered this, because in a previous update, they removed the cooldown from Crippling Headshot, and I thought that trickled down to Weakening Headshot, but it did not. So they have rectified that here. Weakening Headshot no longer has that internal cooldown. And finally, Swift Striker has been nerfed from 20% fire rate to 18% fire rate, which is absolutely reasonable. Next, we get to the Tier 3 items. So, Toxic Bullets has had its build-up reduced. It is now 15% harder to build up Toxic Bullets on any given hero. And I think this is really targeting heroes like Infernus and Mirage and characters like that in particular. Blood Tribute has had its health drain reduced from 50 to 40. It no longer grants 125 bonus health and instead grants 8% Spirit Resist. So, yeah, it hurts you less, and also that Spirit Resist is going to be pretty nice when stacked with the rest of your buffs that you get from this, so that's pretty interesting. Express Shot has also received some changes. The cooldown has been reduced from 4 seconds to 3 seconds. That actually feels pretty good. And the weapon damage has been increased from 150 to 165%. And they also fixed Kinetic Carbine using the primary values rather than the secondary values on the item. I had a feeling that this was bugged, but I wasn't entirely sure, and indeed it was bugged. So now, if we just switch on over to Paradox and buy Express Shot, you'll see that the Kinetic Carbine is doing much less damage than it did before. Let me just nail this guy in the head. 80 plus 19. Yeah, that's definitely lower than it was before. So, yeah, pretty big nerf to the Carbine build for Paradox. And finally, in the Tier 3 category, Cultist Sacrifice has had its cooldown reduced from 260 seconds to 250 seconds, and you'll see why once we get to the Spirit items. And finally, for the Tier 4 items, Ricochet has had its fire rate reduced from 25% down to 20%, and importantly, it will no longer bounce off objectives. So, let's say you're playing Infernus with Ricochet, which is a pretty reasonable assumption, and you're just lighting up a walker. You will no longer be able to proc Ricochet off that, so you're not going to be able to just shoot that giant walker and then be able to bounce to all the minions and enemies nearby. It was just really cheeky, and yeah, I think it's very reasonable that they removed that capability from Ricochet. It's still going to be pretty powerful for regular farming, though. Objectives does not mean that it won't work against camps now. It absolutely does still work against camps, as you can see. Shadow Weave also has 5% more fire rate now on the ambush when you come out of stealth, and Spellslinger got a really wacky change, where it now only activates while you're in combat. So if you're kind of just walking around like I am, spamming random abilities, it's not going to proc the Spellslinger. Whoa, did my game just crash? Whoa, my game just crashed! Uh-oh. That was awkward anyways. So, If we go ahead and shoot the camp, though, and then throw an ability, it will proc Spell Slingers. So battling NPCs does count as being in combat, and so you may just want to, like, if you want to keep your Spell Slinger up between fights, you may just want to go around just tickling random camps and then using abilities to make sure that you're still getting those Spell Slinger procs. But yeah, if you're just walking around not shooting anything, not getting shot, Spell Slinger is not going to work, and the buff will eventually expire. So yeah, just a bit harder to upkeep Spell Slinger between fights. Now let's take a look at the Vitality items. These are, I would say, a lot more spicy than the gun items. So first of all, Melee Lifesteal will now have double the cooldown if you hit someone with a light melee. So it has an 8-second cooldown passively, but if I go ahead and light melee this dude here, it is now on a 16-second cooldown before I can get my next proc of Melee Lifesteal. So yeah, this is pretty interesting, and I think the reason why they're doing this is because it's a lot easier to weave a light melee in between fights without getting parried, whereas a heavy melee comes with more of a risk. And so, basically, if you take the higher risk of a heavy melee, you get a lower cooldown. If you take the low risk option of a light melee, you get a longer cooldown, which seems pretty reasonable. And they've also done the exact same thing to Life Strike, so yeah, just a very important thing to note with Melee Lifesteal now. Also, Rebuttal now has 25 bonus health, so it's gone up from 50 to 75. Pretty cool. Next, let's move on to the tier 2s, though. This is where things get really spicy. Pretty much every single barrier here has been buffed in one way or another. So Weapon Shielding and Spirit Shielding both have had their movement speed bonus increase from 1 to 1.5, and their cooldown reduced from 40 seconds down to 35 seconds. That's pretty big. They've also increased the buff duration of Guardian Ward from 5 seconds to 6 seconds, so 1 second extra of having that barrier, and more importantly, having that 3 meters per second of move speed. And then Reactive Barrier has had its Spirit Resist buffed from 5% to 6%. So every single barrier here is getting some love. I need to play my barrier maxing Warden again, is what this is telling me. But we go from some pretty positive buffs to an absolute gutting of one of the most popular items in the game. Fortitude just got dumpstered. So already you'll notice something is missing. We no longer gain a bonus damage amp. Yeah, that is gone. I actually kind of had a feeling that Fortitude would still be pretty good, even if they removed the weapon damage amp, but that was before they nerfed the cooldown of it repeatedly, and also before this next change. They have nerfed the regen from 3% down to 2% max health regen. That is big. So let me just show you what Fortitude's up to now. So I'm going to go over here and fight this camp to put me in combat. And then I'm going to half health myself a bunch of times. And let's see how long it takes me to actually full heal. So yeah, I'm just gonna sit here and watch my health go. Maybe play some Jeopardy music in the background. I don't know, because this is gonna take a hot minute. Alright, it's finally kicked in. And look at how slow that heal rate is. And that doesn't get any better later in the match. I mean, it is still, you know, a percent-based heal, so I guess technically you're getting more hit points later in the match, but the amount of time it actually takes you to full heal is still just so long, because going from 3% down to 2% is a pretty big deal. We just lost 33% heals, but I guess to go up from 2% to 3%, we'd get a 50% increase, so I don't know what that means in terms of the percentage, but regardless, it's feeling a lot worse now, and we're still not up to full HP yet, by the way. We're still going. And only now do we finally get up to full HP. How long did that just take? That took ages. So I think they're really, really incentivizing the people who previously bought Fortitude to heal up in between fights to just take a trip back to base now, because that genuinely might be faster. The healing at base is certainly a lot faster. The question is the trip on the zipline worth it? I don't even know. But also remember that, you know, if you're healing up from Fortitude, and then you want to try and farm at the same time, well, guess what? You know, that camp puts you back in combat, and it breaks your Fortitude. So this item might genuinely just be dead, because it heals you just so slowly now. The cumulative cooldown and percent-based heal nerfs have really hit this hard, and then you don't even get a weapon damage bonus from it anymore. So yeah, it still gives you that healing in between fights, although it's really slow now. It still gives you a really big amount of bonus health. That's still like the big perk of Fortitude now. And it still gives you movement speed, but yeah, wow, this item got dumpstered. Veil Walker's healing now scales with boons, so as you level up your character, it looks like you're going to get 3 healing per boon. So if I buy this, and then max level my character, we go from 150 up to 246 healing. Alright. Well, I mean, it's nothing super crazy, but it is indeed there. So, yeah, just a small buff to Veilwalker. Counterspell, though, has gotten some really interesting buffs. I already felt like this was a good item if you had the skill to use it. It was a hard counter versus characters like Lash. And, yeah, they have just massively buffed it, so the cooldown has gone from 25 seconds down to 20 seconds. Awesome. It now also grants passively 100 health and 8 spirit power. Nice! That just didn't exist before, that's huge. And also, a successful parry now provides you with 150 healing on top of the spirit power and move speed that it already granted, and the fact that you could just completely deny something like a Lash ult. So, Counterspell just got giga buffed. They really want people to use this item skillfully. You get massively rewarded for using this item now. I'm definitely going to pick this up a lot more now, especially, again, versus characters like Lash that I was kind of already buying it against anyways. And finally, Trophy Collector has had its souls per minute buff from 20 to 23 per basically stack that you get from it, which I think is very fair because this item is a hard sell. Some matches, if it's a low kill match, it's just not going to work out that well for you. So, you know, it's a very high risk, high reward item, and now the reward is just that much sweeter. Finally, let's talk about the tier 4 items for the Vitality category. So, first of all, Inhibitor has basically turned into a build-up item, very similar to Toxic Bullets. So, we have to shoot the enemies repeatedly before we finally get that Inhibitor online. The duration is now 1 second longer, from 3 seconds up to 4 seconds, and you can refresh it during the duration, just like that. So, a bit of a functionality change to Inhibitor. It means that, you know, you won't be able to instantly apply it the second you shoot somebody and then just spray that out across the entire team. You now have to focus somebody a little bit longer to apply that, and then make sure that you're constantly refreshing it, otherwise you're going to have to build it up again. But otherwise, the bonus is still really powerful. Minus 35% damage, minus 30% healing. That's pretty big. Siphon Bullets now also grants bullet resistance instead of spirit resistance, so they've kind of walked back on that again. 10% bullet resist now, and the same is true for Cheat Death. It has gone from spirit resistance to bullet resistance 15%, and they've also reduced the cooldown from 120 seconds down to 100 seconds. I still think nobody's going to buy this item. I genuinely don't remember the last time I've seen this item outside of one freaky dynamo who was using it to guarantee his ultimate. Yeah. Anyways, moving swiftly on, Divine Barrier has received the same buff as Guardian Ward. The buff now lasts for 6 seconds instead of 5 seconds. Witchmail just received a pretty big buff. It now grants 4 seconds of cooldown reduction per hit instead of 3 seconds. So, the tanky characters that like to use this item are now actually going to be getting even more of a benefit from it now. It's really interesting. And finally, they fixed one buggy interaction with Unstoppable, where Silencer's passive was still interacting with it during this state in a kind of weird way, so should just be more consistent now. Alright, now let's move on to the Spirit items. We've got some really interesting shakeups here. First of all, let's just talk about the early buffs. We'll get to the big shakeup later, although if you're an astute viewer, you might already see what's going on here. But anyways, Rusted Barrel has been buffed. It now provides 60 health instead of 50, and it now provides half a meter per second of sprint speed. Small buff, but it is there. And Disarming Hex and Rusted Barrel both have had their cooldowns reduced from 30 seconds down to 25 seconds. So more consistent uptime on these, especially on Disarming Hex. That's actually pretty big. Spirit Strike also is receiving the same double cooldown penalty for light melee hits, as is Life Strike and Melee Lifesteal. And the same is also true for Spirit Snatch. So yeah, if you light melee and you take the easier, less risky option, you get penalized with double cooldown. Fair enough. Slowing Hex, in the Tier 2 category, now provides half a meter per second of sprint speed, and also the debuff visual effect stays on longer, so it's easier to see. So let me just put that on this guy. And yeah, it's a bit easier to see that this person has been hit with the Slowing Hex now. Very nice. Spirit Sap has also been slightly buffed. The spirit power reduction has gone from minus 12 down to minus 15. Very nice. Now, let's talk about Knockdown. This is a Tier 3 item that now also provides 6% ability range. That's pretty nice. And it also has a lower cooldown from 40 seconds down to 35 seconds. So a lot of these active items are getting lower cooldowns. And Rapid Recharge has also been buffed. The spirit power it provides to charged abilities has gone from 16 up to 20. That's cool. Now let's talk about the major shakeup. You might be wondering, why did they buff the cooldowns of so many items? That's because Superior Cooldown has just gotten a major change. Superior Cooldown will now only reduce the cooldown of your abilities. It no longer reduces the cooldown of items. So, you see that Knockdown here has a 35-second cooldown. If I buy Superior Cooldown, it still has a 35-second cooldown. So, the interaction with getting Superior Cooldown to buff the consistency of some items, especially Cultist Sacrifice, is just gone. However, you can still get item cooldown reduction. You just have to upgrade to Transcendent Cooldown, which provides 30% of both ability and item cooldown reduction. So this is now much more powerful than the cooldown reduction you would previously receive with Superior Cooldown, which, by the way, has also been buffed to 25%. But it is now much more expensive. That is the catch. So a very interesting shake-up here to how cooldown reduction works for the Spirit category here, and we're going to have to see how it plays out over the coming days. But I am very excited for this, and I do think it's a pretty fair change to make it so that Superior Cooldown can't reduce the cooldowns of all these items in the game, because it makes the items hard to balance. We had a lot of weird jank with adjusting the cooldown of Cultist Sacrifice and then adjusting the cooldown reduction of Superior Cooldown, and that should all just be a lot simpler now, so I think this is a pretty good change. Now let's talk about the remaining Tier 4 items. Boundless Spirit has been buffed again from 13% bonus Spirit power to 15% bonus Spirit power. That's pretty big. Vortex Web has also been buffed. It provides plus 1 meter per second of sprint speed, and the radius has been increased from 11 to 12 meters. Cool. Finally, Ethereal Shift has been buffed. The cooldown has been reduced from 22 seconds to 20 seconds, very clean. And also the movement speed while channeling has been increased from 3.5 to 4. So, yeah, pretty cool. Nice buffs just to some of these spirit items here. Alright, it's finally time to talk about hero balance. Let's get into it. First of all, Abrams has gotten 2 buffs. The Shoulder Charge Tier 3 has been increased from minus 18 seconds of cooldown to minus 22 seconds of cooldown. So you can shoulder charge even more frequently. And I know what you're wondering. How does that interact with Transcendent cooldown? Well, we can now get down to just a 10.5 second cooldown on the shoulder charge. Yeah, that's pretty neat. And also, the Infernal Resilience Tier 3 has been buffed from 6% to 7% damage regenerated, so just some pretty nice buffs for Abrams. Alright, you knew it was coming. Infernus has been dominating the meta for the past few weeks, and it's time for him to be slapped with nerfs. So, on top of all the global changes, you know, the longer cooldown on the ultimate, less global gun damage, less global base spirit damage, we have reduced bullet damage growth per boon from 0.16 down to 0.12. So as you level up, you get less damage. And now we're at max level of pretty much 9 to 10 damage per bullet. Afterburn DPS has been reduced by a further 13% on top of the global reduction. So yeah, the total amount of damage reduction on Afterburn is actually much larger than that. Afterburn Spirit scaling, however, has been increased from 0.56 to 0.66. So if you actually do get some Spirit investment from these Spirit items, it'll bring back up the DPS of Afterburn just a little bit. The Flame Dash Tier 2 DPS has been reduced by a further 10%, and Flame Dash Spirit Power has also similarly been increased from 0.7 to 0.8. So, just huge nerfs to Gun Infernus. Just global nerfs plus direct targeted nerfs plus nerfs to Afterburn means that the M1 Infernus is a lot weaker now than it was before. Whew, crazy. But it might be more worth it to invest in Spirit now, and might even be more worth it to invest in Spiritual Overflow now, which is an item that just feels perfect for this character, to be honest. So, yeah, that is very interesting, and honestly, we expected Infernus nerfs, and indeed Valve has delivered. Next, let's take a look at some interesting IV changes. So the bullet growth has been reduced just barely from 0.16 down to 0.15. That's bullet growth per boon, of course. And she no longer ignores the shooting speed penalty. So if I just start shooting this guy in the gonads, yeah, I'm moving slower, actually, now, which is kind of a weird feeling for Ivy. But then she regains that removed movement speed penalty on the Watcher's Covenant. So while this is active, she can go back to moving at full speed again, and she shares this now with the tethered teammates. So this could potentially, in a weird roundabout sort of way, be a buff, because you can use the tether on, let's say, your friendly Wraith, and then she doesn't have to buy Fleetfoot, and she can still move at full speed during her, you know, firing her gun. So she'll be able to really go in, Ivy will be able to really go in, and they can just go in together. So it's an interesting change, I suppose. Kelvin is getting one very big change, and that's the fact that he will now freeze the Spirit Urn. So you can no longer turn in the Spirit Urn while you're in the frozen shelter. This felt like such an unfair interaction, to be totally honest. Just, oh, someone's turning in the Spirit Urn. Oh, Kelvin popped on. Guess there's nothing we can do about that now. So, I'm very glad that this has been changed. I think we can all agree this is a good idea. Next up, we have Lady Geist nerfs, because it wouldn't be a Valve update or a Deadlock update without Lady Geist nerfs, so let's get into it. The base bullet damage has been reduced from 23 to 21, so just less bullet growth period, in the form of a flat base damage nerf. Essence Bomb arming time has also been drastically increased from 0.5 seconds to 0.65 seconds. You can really feel that. Much longer arming time now. It means that the enemies are going to have an easier time getting away from your bomb now, and you're really going to need some extra range to try and keep them trapped in that radius. They have also switched up Malice quite a bit here. So first of all, the health cost has gone up from 6% to 7% of your health, and they have also changed the Tier 2 and Tier 3 around. So previously, the Tier 2 would give 30 damage and a 7% damage amp, but now it gives 30 damage and plus 4 blood shards. So if we upgrade that to Tier 2, you can see, yeah, we have plus 4 blood shards, and it's doing more damage. And then the Tier 3 previously gave 6 blood shards, now it gives the 7% damage amp. So you have to max this out to get that additional huge damage amplification. And also, just in general now, you will have a bit of a tighter spread on your blood shards because you're missing those 2 extra shards that would kind of fan out at the side. So, yeah, you're much more incentivized to max out the Malice now. Quite an interesting change. Finally, oh my goodness, dude, they just keep nerfing this. The Soul Exchange cast range has been reduced again from 6 meters to 5.5 meters. This is almost unusable, man. Holy crap. Especially because, you know, a lower base range means that greater expansion has less of an effect on it. Man, oh, I'm gonna buy Warpstone in every single freaking Lady Geist game now. Just, oh, there's my ultimate. Warpstone, bam. That's what you gotta do now. Lash has gotten 2 nerfs. The first one's actually pretty noticeable. The Flog has less range. Oh my gosh, that would have hit previously, but it doesn't hit now. That's because they've reduced it from 25 meters down to 20. That's actually pretty big. Oh my goodness. Really messing with my muscle memory here on Lash. Oh, that's a big nerf. Also, Ground Strike's damage height has been reduced from 3.3 meters to 3 meters. So I believe that this means it's going to be a little bit easier to actually double jump over the Ground Strike now. So, yeah. 2 nerfs to Lash. Kind of surprised, especially because they just giga-buffed Counterspell. McGinnis mains are eating good this patch. Medicinal Spectre now comes out faster and has a better visual cue. Look at that. So now it's much more obvious to your team that, hey, there's a Medicinal Spectre here. I should go inside of that and get healed. And also it comes out faster, just generally more fluid and easier to use. I really like this change. That looks awesome. Also, they have buffed Heavy Barrage's DPS by 6%, so, you know, those global spirit damage nerfs are kind of mitigated on McGinnis here. And they have also fixed mini turrets missing targets that are on the ground from a stun or from sliding, and they also made it so that the mini turrets will now properly target phase 1 of the patron after the shields are down. I thought this was intentional. Apparently it wasn't. So yeah, your turrets will now be able to damage the patron. Very cool. Finally, her health per boon has increased from 52 to 56. So as you level up, you will get much more health, up to a max value of 2,492 before getting any upgrades online. Absolute W patch for McGinnis. Heck yeah. Mirage has gotten 2 changes. Just 2. And one of them's a bug fix. So, first of all, yeah, his tornado will no longer get stuck on or go through walls. It's just been fixed to be more consistent now. That's nice. And the one nerf that they've done is simply tacking a range limit onto the Jin's mark, so you can now only apply it from 45 meters away or closer. So if we get beyond a certain distance here, really hard to see when this actually stops applying. So let me just stop shooting it, back up kind of to here. Yeah, I'm no longer able to apply it, and I can only apply it from... Ooh, actually, not even this distance. Let me get a little bit closer. So I can only apply it from here or closer. So once I step back to about here, I'm no longer able to get Jin's mark on these guys. Or actually, I am still able to get it there. Hold on. Back here. There we go. So yeah, that's definitely going to hurt Mirage's consistency a little bit, and it might be noticeable on lane. We're really just going to have to see. But, I mean, if you're just fighting in this general range, it's still going to be pretty easy to hit your Jin's marks. So, yeah. Just a very small slap on the wrist for Mirage, I feel. Paradox has had one change, and that's just a gun recoil adjustment. You may have already noticed it earlier. It just made it a little bit smoother. That's it. Moving on. Let's talk about Pocket. Pocket has had a couple of other fixes, although some of them don't seem to have actually been fixed. I feel like they're kind of lying in the patch notes a little bit. So they apparently fixed Cloak sliding up walls very quickly. However, you'll notice... Oh, wait, they actually did fix it. Wait. I tested this on stream earlier, and it wasn't fixed. Okay, it looks like they did indeed fix that. So, you know, now it just kind of slides along the wall slowly, and it is now an accurate indicator of where you're actually going to teleport to. Okay, cool, that has been fixed. Thank you, Valve. You aren't lying after all. You just kind of broke it a little bit on the initial release. And they also fixed the cloak sometimes getting stuck on the lip of a corner, so that feels better now. And they also fixed the cloak issue where sometimes you would teleport far shorter than expected. So cloak should just feel way better to use now. Very nice, I like that. Good consistency change. 7 is getting one nerf. His Stormcloud DPS has been reduced by a further 10%. Yeah, fair, very fair. I agree wholeheartedly. Good job, Valve. Sinclair is getting a whole slew of nerfs, and I find this to be kind of interesting because last I checked when it comes to ladder gameplay, he has a pretty low win rate. I can't speak for pro gameplay. I am not a pro by any stretch of the imagination. But, yeah, it's just he's getting, like, just majority nerfs here. I mean, I don't really like playing against Sinclair. I don't want to play against Sinclair, and so I guess in that regard, I'm grateful for these. But, yeah, I don't know. It just feels kind of strange to me. Although, at the very least, they are nerfing Rabbit Hex pretty substantially. That does need a nerf, so that's fantastic. So yeah, let's read them now. Base bullet damage has been reduced from 20 down to 17. That's actually a pretty big nerf to the gun. Bullet velocity also has been reduced from 340 to 300. So yeah, just double nerf there. Harder to hit the shots, especially at longer ranges. Rabbit Hex cast range has been reduced from 30 meters down to 24 meters, so if I just back up to here, I actually can't Rabbit Hex that guy. So that's actually a pretty substantial consistency nerf to the Rabbit Hex. They've also increased the detonation delay from 0.7 seconds to 0.9 seconds, so you have much easier time actually getting away from the Rabbit Hex now. Those extra 0.2 seconds are really going to make a difference. And they also increased the move speed during the Rabbit by a pretty staggering amount, from 22% to 36%. That is one fast bunny now. Look at that. So, yeah, big nerfs to the Rabbit Hex. That's very fair. Finally, Sinclair can no longer teleport back to Assistant while silenced or cursed. To be honest, I kind of already assumed that was the case, and now it is indeed the case that if you are cursed, you cannot switch position with your Assistant. Very fair. Second to last change here, Warden is getting one nerf. The base bullet damage has been reduced from 17.6 to 17. You can't really notice it because of the rounding. I guess. That's it is going to matter for ramping up your bullet damage with those percent-based increases, though, later into the match. But, yeah, just kind of a small gun Warden nerf. Finally, let's talk about Wraith. Don't be alarmed. She's actually not getting nerfed. It's crazy. So, the card Tier 3 has been buffed from a 25% slow to a 30% slow. The Spirit Scaling has been buffed from 1.1 to 1.2, and Project Mind has had a bug fix where it actually wouldn't go anywhere if the player was on uneven ground, which sounds pretty nasty, but now, if I'm on a ramp, yeah, it still teleports, so that's pretty nice. W changes for Wraith here. She kind of got nerfed really hard in the last update, so yeah, buffing up Spirit Wraith actually sounds like a pretty reasonable idea to me. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's videos, so let me know what you think about the new update in the comments section down below. And also, if you found my coverage to be helpful and you enjoyed it, make sure to drop a like down below and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. I'm going to be doing a lot of build testing with the new item changes, so yeah, stay tuned for that. But yeah, with all that being said, thank you guys for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.